If AI is going to work for the creative professional, it's got to be homegrown.
You gave Hollywood a wake-up call, to say the least.
Making narrative content is actually the hardest. And if you're good at it, you know how hard it is.
You are the nerds of the era. You are the pixel priests. And the disruption was heavy. Hey everyone, Drew here at Moonshine Post, coming to you from the vibrant city of Atlanta. At Moonshine, we're all about storytelling, collaboration, bringing visions to life, whether it's for the creative agencies, the big studios, or passionate indies. So come tell your story with us. Today, we're going to be diving in with Michael Cioni, filmmaker, entrepreneur, industry innovator, from co-founding Lightiron and pioneering digital workflows and driving innovation at Panavision and leading camera to cloud at Frame.io and Adobe. Michael consistently builds the future of media technology. With 4 Emmy Awards and a reputation as a leading voice in entertainment technology, Michael's insights are essential. And now, as CEO and co-founder of STRADA, he's focused on what's next, continuing to assist creatives with the democratization of filmmaking tools in the age of AI and the creator economy, which I cannot wait to explore with him today. So buckle up. This is going to be a good one. Michael Cioni, welcome to the Moonshine Storytellers podcast, man. I can't tell you how pumped I am to have you here.
Likewise, excited to be here.
That's great. You're someone who's continually pushing the envelope of filmmaking technology and innovation. And today, I really can't wait to dive into STRADA, your latest venture, and its exemplary role in the AI transformation that the industry is undergoing with workflows and the mindset of the creative media industries, but then also straight into the convergence of the creator economy. Fresh off the heels of your really powerful keynote presentation that you gave at the HPA Tech Retreat, where you gave Hollywood a wake-up call, to say the least, but also urging to bridge that gap between traditional media and the dynamic creator economy. So that's kind of where we'll take the conversation today. I got a bunch of questions for you, but hopefully that's cool. I know everyone's is dying to hear it, so I really appreciate you joining us.
I'm excited. This is a good subject, a good topic, and I appreciate anyone that's bringing this to the community, because the only way we get better and stronger is through conversations like this. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing. I just got back from South by, and my favorite, biggest takeaway was, at this intersection, or what I'm really saying, at this convergence, creator economy takeover, the conversations were actually happening, at the parties, at the panels, and coming out of the professionals' mouth of saying, hey, this is here. So it's now, it's not later. And I was excited the conversation was actually occurring. So, all right, let's set the stage a little bit. So for technology and storytelling. So before STRADA, you've been instrumental in shaping post-production workflows, with Lightiron, and then innovating at Frame.io. And so to prep listeners today, I really want to walk through some of these key phases in this career lead up, and the experiences that influenced your vision of storytelling that gradually led to these collaborative technologies that you've been building. There's a theme going on here, and it seems to be in all of your endeavors. So let's take it away. It doesn't have to be the full break-in story, but I definitely wanted to see that progression from you.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I really don't talk about very often, which is about when I was about 21 years old. I teamed up with a filmmaker, Christopher Coppola, who's Francis's nephew and Nick Cage's brother. And I had a connection with them and started doing some editing. And Christopher had this idea with this project he was doing. He wanted to pair, this is how he described it. He wanted to pair the oldest person in filmmaking with the youngest person in filmmaking and team them up. And those are the types of quirky things that Christopher Coppola often does. And so he had a connection with a cinematographer that anyone who's a cinephile would know. His name is Jack Cardiff. And Jack Cardiff shot movies like The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. And he was in his 90s, and he was in his early 90s. I was in my early 20s. And he was going to shoot the opening sequence of this project, and I was supposed to edit it. And he was told to use the F900. And Christopher got the F900s right after episode 2 that George Lucas had used. Christopher was able to get them. And then I had Final Cut, right? And so we had this crazy idea of Final Cut. and this crazy idea of F900s, and then Jack Cardiff and me. And so I got to go in a hotel. They just put us up in a hotel in Santa Monica and said, you edit when Jack wants to edit. You stop when he wants to stop. You eat when he wants to eat. Okay, great. And I don't know what I'm doing, but I knew Final Cut really well. I was really into this technology. And at the end of this really fun couple of weeks working with Jack Cardiff, I said to him, tell me what you think, because there are people that are starting to rumble. This is like in 2002. So people are starting to rumble that like digital's bad and we don't want it and it doesn't look good. And it's, you know, you're not a filmmaker if you don't shoot on film, nonsense like that. And so I'm like, let me ask Jack Cardiff. And his answer was literally, well, when I started, and I remember when they invented sound, that was his first response,
Whoa.
right? And he goes, you know, I was doing movies that were silent because his first job, he told me, was hand cranking the camera to shoot the King of England getting his crown. Like he was there, right? And he says, this world of sound, people said it'll never happen. It's too complicated. Audiences won't like it. Their tastes are not aligned with that. They read and they watch it. The theaters will never be able to retrofit their theaters to have speakers. The crackling is really poor. How do you get sound on a print? All that stuff was really hard. And he was like, yeah, but it'll get better, won't it? It'll probably get better. And then he says, I remember doing my first movie and they're saying, we now have color film. And that was more than a dozen years later, 20 years later. And he says, and they say, you know, the reds bleed a lot. The contrast ratio was lower. The black and white had this great contrast ratio. The color film did not. The reds were very saturated, almost to the point of people looked like they had a spray tan. And there were these early problems. But and the film stock was more expensive. But he's like, it'll get better, right? And so I'm like 21 years old, listening to this true master of the craft with his British accent and a monocle. He literally looked like the peanut guy. And Jack was installing in me as a really young, ambitious filmmaker, don't listen to the pundits. Follow the technology because the technology will enable you to do more with your art. So ultimately, I just go back to the Cardiff lessons in my life. And that is look at the tech, look at the technology, look at the tools. How are they going to make your film better and your process better, and bet on that. And then your talent makes up the delta. And if you can't approach this with an open mind, then you're really not contributing. You're just a follower. And I don't actually think followers are bad. We need followers. Some people just toe the line. But we also need leaders. And my father used to say that the problem with being a leader is sometimes you get so far ahead, the people you're leading mistake you for the enemy. And you got to be willing to understand that you sometimes get friendly fire. I have a lot of friendly fire in my life. But looking back, almost everything that I've bet my personal wealth on has materialized in a way that was either accurate or beneficial.
I want to talk a little bit about your calling to and motivation to go into STRADA. So you made a really notable transition from a really prestigious moment at Frame.io to co-founding STRADA. And typically with founders, there's a problem to solve. And I know there's a lot of problems to solve currently that we've just recently brought up. But you made it your business, your most recent endeavor. I want to know what motivated you to take that leap. And I think this started maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe the seed started 10 years ago. But what specific challenges, or was there a moment, like a straw breaking moment, where you're like, "That's it, I got to go fix this problem right now"? Yeah. And I want to know what that call to action was for you to go and create STRADA.
Well, this won't help me get a job in the future when I need one. But one thing I learned looking back on my life is about every 5 years, I start over, but I stay in the same industry, but I start over. And I didn't realize I had this little alarm clock counting down in my head until I did this many cycles in a row, but I start with these macro major goals, these major objectives, and those objectives take about 5 years to realize. And my first objective was a company I started called Plaster City, which was actually with that director, Christopher Coppola. I started a post-production startup called Plaster City Digital Post. And he sort of gave me my start in that space. And when I built Plaster City with my college friends, we had dropped out of college and just moved to California from Illinois, and we started Plaster City. It was there that we really wanted to we got really passionate about the transition of tape to files. And we started building SANs in 2003, which was unheard of at the time. And we were building RAIDs. And I remember getting like the 6th Kona card from AJA, and the drivers came on a CD with handwritten drivers on them. It was, that early in this idea of video capture on a Mac. And that once we achieved file-based supremacy, I kind of was like, now what? And what I learned in my way of doing things is the best way to solve the now what question, which is the hardest and the worst, and I don't recommend this to anybody, but the best way to solve the now what is to leave. Now, I always thought that when you start a business, you're supposed to be the captain that goes down with the ship. It's noble. And you're like, everybody can go, I will go down with the ship. But what it turned out is that sometimes the captain goes first, and then I can start building an arc and start building it again. But it's a new trajectory. It's a new point. And so a lot of times in business, we think, if you imagine business, you're like, if I'm going to move up in business, I've got to get promoted. And so I work on getting promoted or something like that. But really, the best way to move up is actually to be demoted in a new trajectory that has a higher ceiling. So Plaster City was about tape to files. Then Light Iron became files from HD to files 4K, 6K, 8K. And we started doing that. On that road, we added mobile technologies. And actually built the first mobile DIT stations in 2005 before DIT was...
I have to throw it out there. That's actually how I found you on the internet, was that mobile station. And I saw you with that photo. This is, I can't even remember how long ago this was. Is this like 09 or 06 or?
Well, we actually did our first, true story. I have a photo somewhere. We built our first mobile post-production solution. This is true. I do have a picture. I'll try to find it. We bought an ambulance. We bought an ambulance. It had lights and sirens, and we put the stuff in the ambulance. And I remember going to Taco Bell in the ambulance because it was funny.
Yeah, that's a Ghostbusters moment right there.
It was our Ghostbusters moments. We had an ambulance, and that was our mobile post-production suite. Then eventually the technology got small enough to put on a cart, but originally you needed a truck. Then it went to a cart, and we started building those. The first time we put it on a cart was in 2009.
That's right.
We had started Light Iron, and a connection came to us and said that the movie Avatar, they are doing, there's something specific about Avatar that's really cool. This is the first Avatar, obviously. And when they were shooting Avatar, they did a lot of practical stuff. They didn't want to just animate everything. And there's a landing sequence at the beginning of the film, and they wanted practical elements to be these 3D elements flying at the camera when this ship lands. So we went up to Kerner 3D in San Francisco, and John Knoll was the super VFX soup there. And they had this big black circular table and a huge can of air on the ceiling. And they put walnuts on the table, and they would blast it down, and the walnuts would fly at the camera. But they wanted this to be A, in 3D, and B, at high speed. 2009, shooting high speed 3D was very hard. Only camera in the world that could do that was a Red one. So you could shoot 60 frames per second in 3D. And because of the complexity of this setup, they needed to reset and watch it back right there. They couldn't send it to a lab to get processed because of the complexity of the whole setup and the time. And everything else, you'd be like, send it to the lab to get processed. So we were asked to build a real-time 3D debayering machine that could load the camera cards on set and watch it back in 3 dimensions on set at high speed because you can't record VTR, right? Because that doesn't have the 60p. So we made that, and we have pictures of us loading this into a truck here in LA, driving up, and we did real-time 3D playback of high speed on red CF cards back in 2009. And Katie, one of our partners in Light Iron, she called it Outpost, and that word stuck. And we came up with Outpost in 2009. And then that became a fleet that allowed our Light Iron company to grow. And we were able to expand rapidly because we didn't have to put brick and mortar in every city in order to service a film that's shot there. And so we were the smallest company probably in the world working on the biggest films. I worked on Spider-Man, Pirates of the Caribbean, Underworld, Total Recall. I had no business being on those films. It made no sense, yet we knew the data, we knew the technology, we knew the craft, we studied for this test, and we mobilized it. We harnessed everything that was barely possible at the time, and it catapulted us way higher up. And that became the momentum for this. And so it's all about, I got a million of those stories where they're born out of necessity. So when you talk about solving a problem, you can solve a big problem like film to tape or tape to files or HD to 4K, or you can solve small problems like how do you watch 3D in real time, right? And those are small problems that you solve along the way. How do I see HDR remotely, right? How do you solve those problems? And those are the things that I just always lean into. I did the first HDR TV show in the world. In 2014, which is now 11 years ago, it was before Dolby Vision was out. We were doing what now you would call Dolby Vision. And Amazon had a show called Transparent, and it was the first show that was ever doing an HDR finish, and Amazon was the first streaming platform to ever display high dynamic range over the internet. And while very few people had an HDR capable TV in 2014, now of course it's a standard. And so that's that 10-year story of that transition that I love to lean in to the big and small problems along the way.
Well, I compliment you. Hats off to the burn the ships mentality. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. I also really like that anecdote. I've always wondered, there was this meteoric rise in Light Iron when you were working on some of the largest movies in Hollywood, but you were the nerds of the era. You were the pixel priests. And the disruption was heavy. I remember when I was actually at the film lab when I saw my first Red One demo, and coinciding with this timeline of yours, and thinking, oh my God, give me this thing. I need to break this thing open. I need to see how it works. I need to go shoot all kinds of shenanigans with it. So knowing that, and then watching all your Outposts and the LilyPad products, coming out, and I watched that on the internet and thought, this is a no-brainer. This is where it's going. Digital cinema is here to stay. This is exciting. And I was part of that Final Cut disruption too, having a great time building post with, computers off the shelves, in 2012, saying like, oh no, I can cut this thing nonlinear. I don't need this giant bay anymore. Let's go. I love it, man. So let's dive into STRADA, because you've got a mission. You got with some tangible impact that you're making. And in a nutshell, what I've seen, I put out a video recently because after we did some beta testing with you, which it's all from the heart, it's non-sponsored. We're genuinely interested in something like this because if something could do all the things I don't want to do, please. And also let me, decrease the latency between me and my creatives, please. But yeah, let's talk about, so STRADA's promising an intelligent workflow automation at its core, allowing creatives to be fully immersed in the craft. So I want to, for us, it gives us a greater capacity for being creative. That's what we want at Moonshine Post. So you don't have to give me a demo, but because people could go and check out your very illustrative content on the website and the very engaging YouTube videos, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But in practical terms, what are the solutions that you're putting together currently? And you maybe even could talk about some of the roadmap stuff that is empowering editors, cinematographers, producers, both sides to focus on the craft itself. And that kind of seems like the mission, but if you have a different mission statement, I really want to hear about Strada.
No, it's great. That's totally right. So if you tie it back to the HPA presentation,
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I had left Adobe and Frame.io is because I could see this new AI thing starting to emerge. And what I don't like, and I'll use sometimes, and I say this in the HPA, I use the word Hollywood to represent a large body of people that consider themselves high caliber creative professionals. And when you say Hollywood, it really doesn't matter what zip code you're in, but you know if you make Hollywood content and you know if you don't. And so that's kind of what that means. But what I learned is that I could see that Silicon Valley had its version of AI and it was shoving it down our throats. And even though I literally live in Hollywood, I didn't like this idea that there was this version of AI coming down the I-5 and it's like, this is how you're going to work. Because Silicon Valley is an amazing group of people with amazing resources and amazing tools, but they don't do what I do. And so I didn't like the idea that they were, in a way, saying, this is how you're going to make things in the future. If AI is going to work for the creative professional, it's got to be homegrown. We have too many weird behaviors and oddities that you can only consider if you're in it, because it doesn't, some of these things we do don't make any sense. And, I was recently on a set the other weekend, and when you're on set and you watch a crew come together to get a juicy close-up, a juicy insert close-up. And I remember this one was of a guy holding a bottle of pills. There is so much going on. It literally takes 25 people to get a close-up of a pill bottle look great. And if you said that to anyone outside of the Hollywood market, you'd be like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, right, but if you really know what I'm talking about, it is so hard to get a juicy close-up. And it takes 25 people to invent all these little flags and lights and reflections, and you're sitting on boxes and you're putting a blanket over your head and everything, and then you're getting the shot, and then 2 minutes after the shot, it all somehow disappeared and they're moving on, right? Only when you're in the industry, if you're listening to this, you know exactly what I'm describing. But outside of it, it doesn't make sense. And so this idea that AI is just going to like waltz its way in here and give us what we've been waiting for all our life, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not, those people that are building a lot of this are unaware of what they're building for, right? And who they're building for. So I had gotten to accomplished a 4-year goal at Frame.io, which was to initiate and ignite this idea where we could start shooting to the cloud. And it ignited, and talking about taking root in fertile soil. It took root in fertile soil. It's not something that everybody does today, but what I built with my team at Frame.io will absolutely continue to germinate and dominate. And by mid-2030, the mid-2030s, everything will shoot to the cloud. It'll be very, very, very different. But today it's on its great trajectory. I think there's like 18 cameras that are capable of doing it. And when I started at Frame, there were 0 cameras that could do this. So we did a great job. But what it really boils down to with Strada is we want to use AI to do mundane, boring tasks. But here's something really interesting. Imagine a room of people. Because part of the best way to describe what Strada does is if you go on your smartphone, you can search for license plate or birthday or a dog, and it would find those photos for you. Everybody's done that. Okay, imagine a room of people. And I said, how many of you have used practically and find value in searching your phone for a photo that you know is there, but you can't really find it? Where is it? Every hand would go up in the room. But then if I were to ask, how many of you would pay extra for that feature on your iCloud account? Every hand would go down. And so what we learned with Strada is we started building what's called an AI inference engine that allows us to plug in different AI models so we can concatenate them together, combine them together. And we allowed them to be capable of doing this in bulk. So you can run 1,000 clips and analyze faces, objects, emotions, locations, props, words, whatever. But what we learned is people's expectation of that is table stakes. They now instantly calibrated, well, I just expect that, because all of a sudden Zoom started giving you summaries of your Zoom calls. Now they want summaries of every video asset. They want everything to be detectable. And they don't want to pay extra for it. And so what we learned in our initial beta, Strada's about 20 months old. We launched a very, very rough and down and dirty beta in July of 2024. And from July to about November, we started with 20 people. You were in the first 10. And we started with 20 people, and then we moved up to about 400 people by November. And we learned that the number one feedback by an enormous margin is, I want to do this on my local hard drive, because Strada was tied to clouds. We thought a competitive advantage and a fast result would be connected to clouds, because it's already a collaborative tool, a collaborative space. So we connect to Frame.io and Dropbox and Google Drive. But what we learned, which seems obvious, but if you're an entrepreneur, you know obvious things are never obvious until too late. What we learned is 99% of people's footage is actually on a hard drive, and only 1% is actually in the cloud. Maybe 5% in a cloud. And you would be like, yeah, that feels right. Like the overwhelming majority is sitting on a drive somewhere, or a bunch of drives. And a few of the files are in a cloud, and most of those files are outputs. They're not original assets. So I don't need to analyze outputs desperately. I need to analyze original assets. So in November, we realized we had a really big problem, is that the analytics engine that we built was favoring the cloud, but everyone wanted it to be on local drives. And so we started going back to the drawing board. What could we do, not just to solve that problem, but what does it unlock? And what we spent actually the last 6 months building is an ability for us to take that drive, not only start to do the analytics at the edge on that drive, but take that drive and turn it into a cloud. And so it was the process of switching, of learning from our users about the value of search that they wanted on a drive, that we learned. We actually came up with this kind of through this process. We're like, actually, what people are saying without articulating it is they don't want a cloud at all. The cloud, we've been conditioned to believe it's necessary for collaboration, that there is no way to collaborate without a cloud. And we've been conditioned by the cloud companies and companies to realize that's just the only way to collaborate. And we said, what if they're wrong? And we invented a new tech stack that allows us to take a hard drive and share everything on that hard drive to your collaborators, and nothing's uploaded to a cloud ever. They can access the drive, and the drive plays the files back. And instead of having to play a file too big for your internet, we instantly virtualize the file at the point you hit play. And this is really interesting. Here's a real interesting tidbit. If you pay attention to the market and the technology of the market, I'll point out something that you didn't realize until I say it, and then you'll realize it. And that is, Apple is the only company that is actually talking about processors. All the other computer companies talk about virtual cores. We listen to Jensen and the NVIDIA guys. We're looking at all these data centers, right? And we've been paying attention to that because we've been told the future of processing power is in the cloud. But Apple is the only company, either they're really smart or they know something we don't know, but they're actually investing billions of dollars in building processing at the edge for each user. Now, where that gets so powerful is, one, if we connect the edge to each other in sort of a BitTorrent way, M3s, M4s, and the new Apple Silicon in 2026, they're going to do a new series of chips. So they're already moving on to their next generation. These become systems that are capable of so many teraflops that your investment in edge computing can now be tied to your team. You might have 5, 6, 7, 8 computers on your team. Most of them, by the way, are just used to surf the internet. And the other ones are actually, they're off 12 hours a day. They're just not being used. You close your laptop, that investment is useless, right? But if you keep it open and you run Strada, a new technology we call Strada agents, now you've built a cloud and you've built your own data center, and you don't need to put it out in the desert somewhere and cool it with 400 air conditioners. You can just run it like you normally run it. And this power is so tangible at the edge that you can take a 4K huge file and instantly convert it in 200 milliseconds to a 2 megabit file and play that to someone across an ocean. That technology exists. We've harnessed it. We've put it together in a new beta, and we believe that it's time for creative people to be their own cloud instead of make deals with cloud companies, which is permanently renting storage forever. You cannot buy cloud storage. You rent it forever. And I know you, like me, get that bill every month and you're like, man, it keeps going up because I keep adding more footage. I keep adding more users. I need more bandwidth. I need more storage. And that is never going to come down. There's no incentive for those companies ever to reduce a cent. And so we've got to compete with that. If we shoot more files, you have to do more outputs. You got to put more media out there. You got to do more work, but you can't afford more storage and they're not going to give you deals. Then we got to take control of it. So STRADA is all about access and search, but it's all about accessing and searching at the edge. And I'm not anti-cloud. I want to use the cloud when I feel it's the right tool. But today I feel like I've had to use it whether I want it or not, which is why I have like 6 cloud subscriptions and I'd love to have 0, to be honest. But, and so that's effectively where building a product and having our mission and listening to users is helping us pivot and merge and move around and discover technology along the way that we never thought we'd come up with without having to be vulnerable and put tech out there.
So, I mean, yeah, I'm salivating as a facility owner of everything you just said. I love approaching the cloud for instantaneous utilization when we need extreme amounts of compute. But if I can harness and get the ROI of the compute that we already have invested in as facilities and just keep moving, that's mind blowing. So, I do remember during the beta phase, by the way, with you, that was one of our requests was like, yeah, this is great, but can we do it on-prem? So if that's the answer, then I cannot wait. And also kudos to you. I could tell during the beta phase, it was really amazing how patient, but also like how present you guys were in listening to the features request. I mean, we were lobbing ideas at you guys and watching the features get made. It's like, okay, here you go. I was like, oh, you made it for us? Sure. This is great. So, what a pleasant surprise though, for you to have picked up that on your beta phase and pivoted so hard to having both solutions. Cause I can see, sometimes cloud utilization it's the nuclear bomb to a knife fight. It's like, we got to go, let's crank it up. But let's go back. Let's go into one of my favorite things about the philosophy that you're bringing to this product, which is it's creative first. And I hear you using the word utility. And, I don't think I came up with this myself, but we've been saying assistive, and I'm really falling into this utility assistive philosophy here. So STRADA emphasizes supporting real human-driven content rather than generative, purely synthetic media. And there's a place for that too. But what is this creative first approach, and why is this so important in the discussions about AI? And you're coming at it as a filmmaker, which in your previous answer you were saying that was the illusion. What you were alluding to was, don't tell me how to do this, big tech. Let the filmmaker say, this is what we want. This is what we want to do. So I'd love to hear this creative first philosophy and that principle that guides you into the roadmap of STRADA.
Yeah, I don't think that, like you said, I don't really care that there is generative AI tools and technology out there. I think people that get all tangled up in the fact that exists is sort of foolish. The world is big. I think it was Paul Graham talks about, he says, as an investor, he says, I don't like when investors, he's criticizing fellow investors, I don't like when fellow investors say, you can't build that technology because this technology over here is too similar, right? And he says, he has a great way to describe it. He says there are millions of airplanes that don't have radar because they're small and they don't have radar and they don't bump into each other. Why? Because the sky is just so big. It's just so big. They don't run into each other. And so it's like, this is where we have to remember that the world is so big. Just because AI does have a place in some material doesn't mean that it renders other material unnecessary. It can have room for both. I'm simply building a product for people who A, prefer to generate in real life, and B, want to consume material in real life. And most of us will consume both. As a consumer, you'll get a little bit of AI, you get a little bit of UGC, you'll get a little bit of Hollywood narrative stuff. There's room. It's a big sky. There's room for everyone. Now, the reduction in Hollywood is really a story of like where the business model has failed and how they actually built the industry during times that were good. But it isn't, it's not saying that we didn't make stuff good enough that people don't want our stuff anymore, or that people won't want narrative films and TV shows. That's not true either. But I am trying to build a tool and technology and a platform that allows people who are building things in real life to just do it better and faster. Because one thing I do believe UGC has taught us is that the amount of material we produce must go up, because people get really excited to consume more and more. Again, it's a big sky. So there's a lot of people to consume stuff, and they want to see the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. The best YouTube channels actually are doing more than one episode a week. And it's really hard to do even one a month for a lot of people. And there are people that can do 2 or 3 a week produced material. That stuff does really, really well. But you can't make 1, 2, or 3 serials a week unless you have a really good workflow. And that's really my opportunity with STRADA, is to help people move things through the chain of custody so much faster and have a single source of truth and be able to connect, as you heard before, with STRADA agents without having to upload everything and download and upload and download, and just access remotely and review and cut and eliminate that upload and download process, and just bring people onto one platform that can transcribe, translate, analyze, facial rec, search, and then edit and comment and things like that. And so putting it in a platform helps make things a little bit smaller too. So those are the philosophies that are being generated by what's happening in the real world, and why I'm not anti-generative AI at all. It's just not really where I'm passionate about, and I want to build solutions for in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think something you said that stuck with me is, there is a place for intentional storytelling, right? And this is the tool. I think that's the first time I've heard you describe it as, transferring it quickly through the chain of custody. And I like that thought pattern there. And also single source of truth, which is we're big on at Moonshine. I mean, the hub and spoke mentality of this tool being able to interconnect through APIs is actually incredible, especially now that you're talking about distributed computing. But this intentional filmmaking aspect is the or the intentional storytelling aspect with a big sky. Like, it's still there. The demand is there. There is a downward pressure on budgets that we're seeing right now in this current shakeup, as well as low output. But it's not because there's no demand. And it was refreshing to hear you say that. This tool is still the imperative is you have to embrace AI, but the AI actually should help you streamline and make more story.
Yeah. I'll tell you one that I built for my own need in STRADA, and it came out really recently, and people that have found it love it. I mentioned earlier, when you get on a Zoom call, when it's over, you get a transcription of what was said, and you can get a summary of that. And people will take documents and things, put them in ChatGPT and ask for summaries and stuff like that, right? And I'm like, but I want that on all my footage. I do all these interviews. I want to read not just a transcript. I want to read a summary. And then can I generate my own summary? And I have different needs for that. And one of the things that I find super annoying and I can't stand to do is writing descriptions for YouTube, and then having to write all the time codes for all the chapter markers, which is a tedious task. And sitting at that description when the file's uploading and you get to that page, if you've ever done this, you're just like, oh, what am I going to say, right? And I'm like, I'm going to build that. And so STRADA, you can take your files in there, you transcribe everything, and then you could say, make a summary. And we have even a button for YouTube, and it'll make the time codes, so the chapters are done with the time codes, and it'll write a description. It'll do it for meetings, for interviews. It'll do narrative storylines, and then there's a custom button, and you can just tell it. And to test it, I loaded in like some Disney movies. I loaded in Cinderella, and I said, I get it transcribed, and I write, summarize all the relationship Cinderella has with her sisters. And it gives a whole like psychological breakdown of this relationship. And I don't know exactly where I'd use it, but the fact that I can get that out of a video asset is so cool. And then I loaded in the movie National Treasure, and I said, give me all the character traits of the main character, Nicolas Cage. He plays is called Benjamin Gates. Give me all his character traits. And it puts it all out there and explains it. And the fact that I can do that off video assets, interviews, think about church sermons, scholastic, TED Talks and things like that. And then, of course, you could do it with films and YouTube videos and podcasts and stuff like that. This podcast, you can run the transcript through Strada, summarize it. You won't have to write it. It'll write in a fantastic description. It'll give you the time codes of the topics. And then you could just say, make an adjustment here and there, right? Like that is exactly what you were honing in on. It's the parts of the job that we don't want to do that help us move through the chain of custody faster. And it's not at all, it has nothing to do with job replacement. That's a misguided criticism. It's not about job replacement. There are AI tools out there and AI technology that will replace jobs. I would honestly say, so what? All technology in the history of history replaces some previous job. The AI is not new. It is naive to assume that all jobs must stay the same going forward and AI can't remove them. We're going back to the wheel here, right? And the horse and this is all technology replaces jobs. You can't say new technology has this prerequisite where it must not eliminate some job in the past. That doesn't make any sense. So we have to understand that. But the AI that I'm talking about from creative standpoint isn't at all about replacing a job. It's about moving faster through the pipeline so you can actually do your job better. Most people will say, I have so much to do, it's hard to do my job. And if I can eliminate a lot of those tasks, the job you are actually hired to do, it has a little bit more room for you to do it. And that's a lot of what ultimately the word workflow is supposed to be.
Yeah, I don't know who said this quote, but it's some influencer probably paraphrasing someone else who wrote it maybe 50 years ago. But it's one of the most delightful things of being human is being able to be creative. And the more time I can spend personally in my personal life being creative, doing the one thing that makes me uniquely human, the better. And which is the benefit of a lot of these tools. There is a little bit of philosophical paradox that I'm personally dealing with, and several of the Moonshiners is, it's like this is a golden age of this is very Promethean, check out this revolution because you know how to do this, and now you can do it 10 times faster and stay creative. It really is this incredible moment for us as current filmmakers, and which we'll get into with the creator movement stuff here to cap us off. But there's also that we know that because we know the why. We've done these 10,000 hours, right? There is what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you care to comment, but there's a heck of a lot of compression here on learning to get to the why instead of, okay, well, now I have all these assistive things. I don't even know the critical thinking behind why I did this. And that's the next gens of storytelling to figure out through innovation. But I am struggling with that. And I know how amazing this is for me in my current position because I've spent the last 20 years getting here. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, now I don't have to do that anymore. Thanks, bro. Thank you. I could go be what bees me. So I don't know if you care to comment on that compression of the knowing the why when you have all the how in front of you.
Oh, that's really juicy. I like that. Yeah, because the educator in me says learn the rules and then break them. If you learn the rules, then you can break them. So then you need to know the why. in order to understand what rules you're breaking, which should unlock a lot of opportunity. But I also know there's a flip side to that coin that refers to this phrase, pay your dues.
Sure.
And I always give young people advice that if you ever work for someone that says pay your dues, run away from them. Because pay your dues to me is a euphemism or sort of a representation of that person suggesting that they're threatened by you. And if someone is audibly saying you need to pay your dues, they actually see a threat in you. And that's a good sign that you're onto something, but it's a bad person to work for because they're going to hold you back, right? And so some of what you're saying with like the why, I think a lot of times people are protective of tradition. And I actually said in the HPA presentation, if we are overly protective in tradition, we could lose all this cachet that we've generated. And I know some of it is going away. And so traditions are overprotection of traditions might be really bad. And that sounds kind of crude to some people because it's like, yeah, but you're saying throw away all these traditions that we have. I'm like, well, on some level, if you know them, you can still hold them in your heart, but applying those traditions going forward is probably a bad decision because the market doesn't care the way you may care about these traditions. And that's why I find it, it's fun here in LA. Quentin Tarantino buys up theaters that are going out of business and then kind of cleans them up. And you can go there and watch a print of, Hook on a Saturday and see a Hook print that looks really interesting to watch, right? And that's kind of fun. But see, that's a protection of the tradition that is for such a small, infinitesimal amount of people. They don't really care. They just don't care. And the Tarantinos and the Tarantino fans would say, why don't you care? This is so magnificent and precious and special. People just don't. People just don't. So if you're overprotective of a tradition that people really don't care about, you're actually burning calories for very little gain. And I understand that I'm stepping on toes just by saying that, but I'm trying to give advice. And this is that bridge of like, well, what does the data say? And if you want to keep telling stories in the future, then relinquishing some connection with these traditions should allow you to create more in the future. That's a good thing. And we might have to make some compromises here because we shouldn't think about it in terms of wins and losses, I said, right? Like, it's like, what do we want to do? And if we want to create, then the system's got to change or it will change us. And when it changes us, we really won't have a strong foundation to stand on. My old boss at Panavision, she used this term that I really love. She says, you never want to make friends when you need them. And it's like, when you're desperate, that's when you start electioneering and trying to it's like, yeah, it's too late at that point. It's too late. The decision's already been made. And so you want to be proactive before some of these decisions are made. And I think we are at the fourth quarter of Hollywood's decision of like, what is the new Hollywood? What's the next Hollywood going to look and feel and be like? We are at the very, very end of this. Otherwise, it will be decided for us. And if you're a young filmmaker, your opportunity is not to try to come to Hollywood and do it the way these mentors and people you look up to do. It's really not. I would advise most people not to do that. It's to go out there and find a new voice and a new way to do it. I don't want to call this a resurgence of independent film because I actually think a lot of independent film is too protective of traditions. And I think they love it's great. You get back from South by, there's a lot of independent film that's more of the same. And that's not wrong, but I think there's people there are some independent filmmakers that are kind of bucking the trend, doing something different. And it may not be a perfect fit for Cannes or Sundance, but it might fit in a South by in some of these other places because there's a new form of entertainment that is going to be invented and become huge over the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a little bit about that and wrote about it in our blog and newsletter of saying I was there celebrating films that we were part of, and winning prizes, and then friends of mine who had made these movies, but a lot of it did feel like kind of a party on a life raft. And, and and very, very much, you can't get on this life raft. We made it. We are the ones that survived. It's this, and there's a danger in that. And so that's why I kind of I'm always haunted by this educator's conundrum of teaching the why, or at least the didactics behind that for the future storytellers. But let's dive into it will be decided for us, because our last but not least is this creator movement convergence here. Really exciting keynote address at the 2025 HPA Tech Retreat just a couple weeks ago, and nothing short of a wake-up call that you gave to Hollywood. Now, you were proposing a lot of solutions, and people should go check out that video, but you proposed that Hollywood should act as enablers rather than gatekeepers, which is something you were just dabbling in just now. And I want to know if we can expand on that as an enabler role, and then we'll dive into the filmmaker side. So we'll both do both sides. But we have to. What I took away from the HPA was cachet and trading in on it now while we still can. As you just said, in the fourth quarter, we've got to do the Hail Mary. We got to figure it out. What's the play? So let's talk about this enabler role, practically in the context of the current working Hollywood studio system.
Yeah. So if people want to watch it, if they Google, "Is this the end of Hollywood?" on YouTube, they should be able to find it. Yeah. What it boils down to is this. I think it's a changing consumer taste, or an evolving consumer taste. People's tastes are changing in what they want to consume and how they want to spend their free time. And that was something that the Hollywood business model, if we break it down to a pure business model, we did not anticipate. We have had effectively the same business model for almost a century. It's appointment viewing. If it's a film, there is a strong appointment viewing. There's a theatrical experience. It is a one-to-many experience in the way you distribute it, right? And it's about a 120-minute character arc structure. That's traditionally, 99% of the theatrical film experience kind of goes through this. And it's great. It's really great. Then streaming comes along. And what people won't remember, and I'm happy to criticize this of the HPA. 10 years ago, when Netflix started showing up at the HPA, they were a pariah. People didn't like them. They didn't trust them. There were all these articles. And if you go back to 2012, 13, 14, I was actually with David Fincher working on, I think, Dragon Tattoo. I think it was Dragon Tattoo, maybe Gone Girl. I can't remember. But one of those two films. And David was gearing up to do House of Cards, which was the very first internet television series. And that sounds weird even saying it. You're like, that wasn't that long ago. Exactly. It wasn't that long ago. And House of Cards was the very beginning of the internet episodic. And so this started to change this business model. And Netflix was not celebrated for disrupting the business model. They even thumbed their nose at a theatrical projection of any of their projects. So why do we have to do this? The Academy requires that you play your film theatrically to even be considered for an Oscar. It doesn't matter if it does well or if anyone shows up, but it has to play through a projector, which when you think about it, seems kind of silly. But it has to play through a projector onto a white screen for it to be considered for an Oscar. And Netflix was disrupting that. So the business model started to change, and Netflix showed people a whole new business model that the incumbent business model of traditional theatrical Hollywood just didn't understand, didn't know it even needed. It's medicine, but they thought maybe it was at best a vitamin. And so Netflix started to get really, really healthy. And Netflix to this day is not only the biggest, they are the most successful content studio there is. They're also the only one that's really profitable of all the streamers. And so this is a really interesting thing that their business model worked and Hollywood's business model didn't. In fact, yesterday I read the article that Village Roadshow filed for Chapter 11.
Yeah, saw that.
And it's like, you don't have to go back very far to find data that says now Village Roadshow, if you don't know, is an amazing production company that made movies like The Matrix, right? And they're very, very experienced in making great films, but their business model is based on a centuries-old traditional way of making films and distributing them. And as soon as movies started to have day and date releases on streaming, it really affected their business model. And you might say, yeah, but we want consumers to have the experience to go to the theater and have that experience. That's a changing consumer taste. They don't want to do that anymore. I presented data that said in 2023, the average American only went to the theater twice. And that number is continuing to go down. If you go back to 2003, it was much higher and it just keeps going down. That number is getting so dangerously low to zero that even people that are like A-list members and things like that of AMC, they're not going to have enough critical mass to keep the system afloat. And so that evolving consumer taste of how people want to watch and consume and what they want to consume is changing. It doesn't mean they don't ever want movies. It's just that you got to make only the amount of movies they want, and you got to present it to them in the way they want. And they're telling us, as hard as it is for Hollywood to hear, they're telling us they don't want to see it in a theater. I mean, that is just plain English. They don't want to watch our movies in movie theaters. And that gets people really freaked out. If you watch the presentation, someone had said to me, you really rehearsed this very, very, very well. And I said to them, I presented a lot. I presented well over 1,000 times, but this one, I said to my friend, I had to really get this one right because I knew if I was going to inspire any change, I couldn't give them 1 ounce of reason to criticize me. And if my words weren't right and the slides didn't look good, the data would not land, because the data was what it's all about. These are stats. They're not even my opinions. They're statistics. It's unbiased information. And if I mucked up the presentation of that, I was afraid that this audience of like 900 studio executives would not take it home with them. They'd only find all the flaws. And so I had to like really, really clean up to try to make this thing like as clean as possible and remove as much, mistakes as possible in what's appropriate for a presentation. It can't be perfect, but I wanted it to be as perfect as possible so that they could really focus on the data. And there was nothing that I was doing that was blocking that information from getting through. And so I think it's that vital. Like it has to be that clean and clear and understanding that this is really a consumer body that is telling us what you have made was great, but we don't want it anymore. And so if you are passionate about storytelling, you have to figure out where they're going and what they want, because you cannot be Quentin Tarantino and buy every movie theater in the United States. It doesn't make any sense, right? You're gonna have to give them what they want where they want it. Otherwise, you're just gonna be stuck with tradition. And that's all you're gonna have left is these ghosts of tradition. And we can talk about that on our front lawn in a rocking chair, and that sounds great. But, we don't want to talk about the good old days. We want today to be the good old days, right? And so we got to reinvent so that the good old days remain happening right now. And there's all these new filmmakers graduating schools. What are they going to do? Because they were taught an archaic, failing system of storytelling. What they were taught is not going to work. So they're actually being malinstructed because they're not actually learning how to tell the stories the way the consumers do it. By the way, all those students are TikTok addicts. All of them are. Yeah. So, they know what they're consuming, but they have this connection with this long form story. And we have to figure out how we're going to do that, or else there is no future.
I love that. I don't even have to ask the question. I just got to wind you up. I get to hear what I want to hear. It's amazing. I mean, on the converse side, obviously, yeah, the filmmaker. I feel a lot of that, since we're very, very connected with our community in both East and West Coast, and yeah, I'm fielding that all the time with the institutions that we volunteer on, and a lot of the festivals too. We do a lot of grant work, and it's always like, hey, how can we shepherd this young talent? And I'm thinking, well, unfortunately, I think you just graduated from a school that was teaching you something from 30 years ago. and being born into an industry that doesn't operate that way. And but there is this thing called disruptive technology here that you can just go use right now and go tell your story. So yeah, how do you envision this independent creator? I mean, okay, well, actually, let's go to the channel here real quick. You've actually on the side for telling the story of the STRADA development, you've also been playing the role of creator yourself, and I commend you for that. And what I love about the channel so much is that it's it's part laboratory, it's part exploration. It's part let's just break it, or let's see if we could pull focus with this XR helmet. Let's see if we could do it. But you still are making something, and you're also collaborating. You're doing this intentional thing with other filmmakers as well. So I really want to know if there's anything that you've learned in that process of trial by fire with your own product currently with STRADA on set, but also by forcing yourself to work within the creator model, and how you're seeing that independent creator and smaller scale production house working effectively alongside this current major studio if they choose to play ball as you were urging them to do.
That's great. In the tech world, we use the phrase "eat your own dog food." and so like people that don't use their own product are never going to really solve the product's problems and make it better. And so I'm a big fan of eating my own dog food because it exposes to me the problems. And in starting a YouTube channel, one, I believe in the creator economy. So I needed to learn what that is like. So I had to become one. So then when you become one, and I'm not acting, I'm just like, I'm doing it, right? You go, okay, well, what are the real problems? Well, I mentioned one that was recently solved, which is I don't like writing descriptions and figuring out chapters and making time codes. That was born out of building a YouTube channel and always kicking myself when I have to do that step that I don't want to, and I'm never happy with it, right? So solve that problem. That's a real simple, small one. But another one that's a lot bigger is in a team. We have a team about 5 people that are staff that are helping us make the stories and tell our YouTube channel, between cinematography, producing, editing, and the like. And I realized how many cloud subscriptions we have. I have a subscription to LucidLink, and it's over $500 a month. I have a subscription to Frame.io, and it was over $400 a month. And I have a Dropbox subscription, and it's over $200 a month. And then you add on things like Slack, and you add on other products, the Adobe Suite, which is just a complete ripoff. And like all of these tools, I'm realizing we were spending $2,400 a month for a team of 5 creating YouTube videos. This monthly nut got so painful that I realized a team of 5 isn't that big, but it's also not that small. But it's like, a lot of people have teams of 4 or 5. We realize as we ask more and more people, they're all spending over $2,000 a month. A company like yours is probably going to spend 4 or 5 times that a month for the same tools I just mentioned. And I realize that's the problem. It's like, to be a creator, we have to subscribe to so many things, and those things are so overpriced because of their requirement to live in the cloud. And most cloud companies, the biggest nut they have to pay is cloud storage. Cloud storage is going to cost $32 per terabyte, and people have to make money on that. So they raise it to $42, $52, $62, $72 per terabyte, because it's just the nut that you have to pay AWS or Azure, right? And so then they want to make some money on that. And then people charge for users. And I learned I can't stand paying for users. It really frustrated me, because as I'm starting this YouTube channel, and when I want to bring in people, how can you ask a creator in January how many collaborators they need in July? That's a crime. A creator can't know that answer. It's not fair, because as we go through production, our teams change sizes. And so what do people have to do? They have to share emails. You have to bump people off and bring people in that you're not sure if they're done. You have to constantly track that, which is just a waste of time and energy. And so user-based pricing is wrong for creators, and cloud-based storage is wrong for creators because of video. If it was cloud for just pure documents, my iCloud, I don't put video in my iCloud, right? My iCloud is less for that. Like when I'm editing, video is so big that I need a lot of cloud storage, and that stuff is really expensive. In fact, the actual statistic is a gigabyte on a hard drive is 40 times cheaper than a gigabyte in the cloud. It's a 40x multiple.
Yep.
And so it just becomes impossible when you think about over your entire lifespan, you're going to put petabyte after petabyte after petabyte of material is going to come through Moonshine. Where are you going to put it? Not the cloud. It doesn't make any sense. But we've been hoodwinked into this, and the pandemic sort of gave us an acceleration. It's like the cloud's going to solve our problems, when in reality, now that I've looked at it again from a new perspective, it just moved my problems. It didn't solve all of them. And they're just in a new place, and I get a bill I didn't get before. And it's really hard to track. It's really hard to see if you ask anyone, how much are you paying for this, this, and this, and this, and what are you getting for it? It's really hard to know exactly how it's broken down. It's really hard. And so building this YouTube channel made me frustrated with other tools. And I'm building a YouTube channel to try to use AI to help automate the process. And I learned the thing that was driving me the most crazy was all the tools that I need and all the processes that I had to pay for and all the storage that I had to have and all the user tracking. And I said with my team, like, that's what STRADA needs to solve. And so we're using AI to accelerate mundane tasks, but we're building a platform that eliminates products, and we're just going to knock them all down. If we're successful, if I'm unsuccessful, I'll need to come work for you. But if I'm successful, we should knock down all these products that disparately you require to like kind of quilt together to create this sort of like bumpy workflow. And it should just be in one tool, and it shouldn't matter how many collaborators you have, and all of your investment in your computers, which you need anyway, and all of your investment in your hard drives, which you need anyway, shouldn't be something you have to double up pay for. You already pay for an employee. Oh, well, if that employee has to access a product, you have to pay for them to be in the product. Now you're paying more for that employee. And you already have hard drives. Oh, if you want that drive to be shareable, then you got to upload it and put it in the cloud. But you already bought it. Oh, and you got to pay for cloud processing. You've got M4s sitting on your desk. Why do you need to pay for cloud processing when there's an M4 and you're asleep and it's literally doing nothing? Like that's how we're going to solve this problem for the creator economy and for anyone making content. So that's what we're really dead set on trying to solve.
This is incredible stuff because filmmakers really do have an incredible opportunity here. If they're willing to adapt quickly and use the tools assistively to actually embrace change, but create more content. Honestly, it's like that whole Jevons paradox thing that kind of like swept the internet for a phrase for a minute there. It's like, if you, I don't know if that kind of caught your eye, but by that principle, there should be, a much more bigger demand for storytelling now that we can actually create it more abundantly. And I'm excited for that personally. I'm the optimist, I guess, on that side of the AI, but also the creator economy, and also being a facility owner and a longtime collaboration service provider. I love what you've been doing from the bridge building side of providing this opportunity, a tool for this opportunity, for this next generation of whatever the new Hollywood or the new disruptive, dislocated studio system is going to be. This enabler thing that we talked about earlier, I do want to see the ideal coexistence or the sustainable relationship there is what we're all kind of trying to find. I know that the industry itself has to move. They have to make a decision. And there's a lot of kind of stalling right now that I'm feeling right now. And today it's March 20th, 2025, a lot of waiting for the big power players to make the move. Meanwhile, the creators aren't waiting at all. And that was very prevalent at South by and also refreshing. But I am curious if you have this is so you could take us out here. I'll ask you one more question about STRADA roadmap, but if you could take us out here of what is the sustainable path if Hollywood at the HPA conference, as you pleaded, hey, let's trade on our cachet, let's transcend, we can't beat them, so we need to join them by offering conduit into and preserving parts of the craft. A lot of it was a plea to preserve some of the best parts of the craft. I don't know if you have anything more to add to that about what makes that sustainable alongside the people who will be using your tool to create more. So there's a question in there somewhere,
Yeah, I
Michael. If
got
you
it.
want to dive on that grenade, let me know.
I got it. And the answer, I do have the answer, and I didn't share it at the HPA because it wasn't the right, the objective that I wanted to do was present the reality check and some solutions for the group of people in that room, for what they can do today. But ultimately, if you're asking me, well, what is the bigger picture? What's the big solution?
Yeah, what's your agenda? I mean, there's a really great filmmaker agenda that you have.
If I didn't start this Strada thing, I probably would do what I'm about to say. And I've had this. I was telling a DP over drinks recently. I was like, she was like, "You should do this," and I was like, "I'm doing Strada." But this opportunity really is this: what is going to work for what Hollywood can do, but can no longer do, and what the creator economy wants to do, but can't do. And by that, I want to be clear. Making narrative content is actually the hardest. When I talked earlier about like getting a close-up of a bottle of pills, it is so hard to tell narrative. It's so hard. I mean, it's just impossibly hard. And if you're good at it, you know how hard it is. It literally takes 150 people to make an episode of television that's Emmy award worthy or Oscar award worthy. And if you say, no, come on, you can do it with like, a dozen people. You can't. You just can't. And the Blair Witch projects are the exceptions, but you can't. If you're going to do high end, it takes a lot of people. So the opportunity is to look for something new. And I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, the way we communicated in business was you either texted someone or you used email. And then this little company called Slack comes along and says, actually, we think there's something in between text and email. And it's not text and it's not email, but it's in the middle. And with a very sharp point, they wedged in there and then they wedged it open. And then Slack absolutely solves a problem that is not infringing on text and it's not infringing on email. And you know when to use it and when to use the others. But 10 years ago, you didn't have it and you didn't know you needed it and it wasn't a need. That's exactly what I predict is going to happen with how we're going to distribute content. Today, there is basically YouTube, which we could call text messaging. And then there is Netflix, which is the best platform for high quality content in the Hollywood level space. And we could call that email. What's going to happen is a wedge is going to come in, and it's not Netflix and it's not YouTube, but it's going to be Netflix. It's got to be a platform that's super high quality, but it's going to be driven by likes and engagement. So instead of having to raise money to build the content like Netflix does, it's how you pay for YouTube and why YouTubers can make so much money, because if people watch it, you get paid. That's a very capitalistic approach to how the best actually rises to become the tall poppy. So I believe there are people that want to do narrative, and people will want to pay for narrative like Netflix, but they want an alternative side of it and they want more of it. That is going to be this new wedge. And so someone has to invent a new platform that is a little of YouTube and a little bit of Netflix, which is like a little bit of text and a little bit of email to make Slack. And that will wedge in there and it'll expand, and only the best people will do it. And you might say, yeah, but what if someone puts bad stuff up there? No one watches bad stuff and they won't be able to afford to make it and put it there because it won't be inexpensive to produce. And if people don't like it, capitalism will make that decision for the platform, right? And so that's where this new form of UGC high-end could actually be.
Yeah, you're democratizing the actual platform feedback loop, right? I mean, that's or the distribution method at this point. So
yeah, and when you go to YouTube what you're looking for, and it isn't Netflix, and when you're on Netflix what you're looking for, and it isn't YouTube, and well, that's where I think there's an opportunity to graduate something in the middle.
Well, this has been incredible, Michael. If there's something that you'd like to share about what's next for Strada, I know that we've got NIB coming up, or something on the roadmap. I'd love to hear it. And then I will high five you and thank you for your time. We'd love to hear
Yeah.
what's next.
Well, NAB at the time of this recording is about 3 weeks away. And if it's after April 2025, we will be releasing what we call agents. You can connect your hard drive to share remotely so you don't have to upload to a cloud. What we're going to do then is so cool. You're adding sharing, downloading, uploading, and commenting and transcription. So imagine for a second when you have to get a file to someone for visual effects, you have to upload that file to a third-party cloud repository to send that file to that person. Why can't they just pull it whenever they want off the drive that it's on? Because it's already on a SAN or a NAS or a RAID or somewhere, and they could just pull it when they want. It isn't any slower because you're still bound by the bandwidth on both ends of the up and the down. So you might as well just pull it, right, directly. Now think about commenting. This is so cool because today when you do an output, you have to render an entire output. You got to put it on a drive. Then you got to upload that. And then, but it's like, just skip that. Just make the comment directly on the asset. And some NLEs, this is an old trick from Final Cut, but there's some NLEs you can output what's called a reference file. So it's a non-self-contained file. And you can output an hour timeline in about 10 seconds. And it looks like a QuickTime movie on your desktop, but it's like 500 kilobytes because it's literally just an XML pointer. So you can keep working, but STRADA can see that XML, that pointer file, and you can make comments on that pointer file, and there was no export even needed because it doesn't have to go to its own object storage to be commented on. And then you can think about how powerful this becomes when you want to upload assets and download them and share them just directly from people's disks. This becomes a totally new paradigm. And we've got a lot of problems and challenges to solve, but that's what innovation's all about. But we really think we can unlock a new form of collaboration that it's undeniably faster. It's undeniably cheaper because cloud storage is most of what you pay to use any service. And I have zero, we're not charging for that. And so it's just a new way to start thinking about how we should start working. And we need pioneers. My hat's off to Moonshine because one, you do stuff like this. Moonshine is very community focused. And that's also a key to being able to be in the future. This Hollywood keep out sign and only you have to be this tall to ride the ride, that's not going to work in the future. Accessibility plays unilaterally. And so, there are famous people that have built and own movie studios or post houses and stuff, but they're not accessible. That's old school. Accessibility counts, and I champion you for that because it's awesome that people can get to know you. And if they get to know you, then you can serve them better. And so that's important. Plus, only confident people give their secrets away. Non-confident people call, oh, this is my secret sauce. I can't share this. I'm not telling, when I was in post, there were these post houses like, we have our secret sauce LUTs. And I'm like, give me a break. Give me a break. You don't even know you don't even know what you're saying and how ridiculous it sounds. Now, they were able to convince some fools that actually mattered. But most of the time, I learned that if you were transparent, which Moonshine is very transparent, it actually is breeding confidence. You're oozing with confidence. And that makes me want to be a customer and a partner. And so like that transparency and accessibility helps everybody. And a rising tide floats all boats. Everybody knows that. And so I love the fact that you make these conversations possible and that you go out there and shake hands. And for anyone that hears this and is considering going to NAB or Next NAB or IBC or Cinegear or South by Southwest or whatever, you got to understand that we need to shake each other's hands to really take the best next step. And so I think people think tech is just about something I can read on the internet, and it's not. You got to be fellowshipping with people, and so it's vitally important to be in person in order to really get what you want out of the tools and tech and talent that's out there.
Big fan of the philosophy and the practicality of what you're doing here, Michael. And I really appreciate your insight and the passion you brought today. I'll do the outro, and I can't wait to see you at NAB.
Awesome. Me neither.
Huge shout out to the legend himself, Michael Cioni, for dropping by and dropping some very serious knowledge bombs today. Man, that was very inspiring and very thought-provoking. One of the coolest things about the industry is you got to learn the rules to break them. When you push the boundaries, challenge tradition, and you can flip the script, that's where the real magic happens. Filmmaking isn't about playing it safe. It's about taking risks. And Michael is proof of that, and that future belongs to the disruptors. If you're a professional in the filmmaking and television or storytelling industry, and you're trying to navigate this very interesting intersection right now in this industry, or you're just as stoked as we are about where STRADA is heading, subscribe and leave a review and tell the crew. Until then, next time, keep creating and stay legendary. And thanks for joining us on the Moonshine Storytellers podcast.